Everyone, welcome to season 4 of Streaming Alchemy. It's been a while getting here, but I am really happy to be back. So on today's show, we're going to take a look at ways to create dynamic lower thirds, basically lower thirds that no matter what you have set to program, the right layout and content will be displayed for you when you call up a lower third. In addition, we're going to be doing this for both VMix and for Tricaster. So this will be expanding a bit on some of the things we cover. But before we get into that, I want to invite everybody, if you have any comments, have any questions, please just post them in the comments as we go along, and I'll try to get to everything as we get through the show. Also, if you'd like to join us on air to call in, we have a call-in number now, basically a URL you can go to, and somebody from the studio here will get you on air with us. So, good to get back. So, to get started, I want to talk a bit about exactly what we're going to be doing here. And probably the best way to do that would be to just show you on screen what this output is going to look like as we do everything. So, what we wanted to have set up, and I'll do this, in VMix to start here. What we want to have set up was a way where whatever I put into program, I would have the right lower third. So effectively, I can come back and say, let me turn on a lower third here. So you can see the lower third sitting over here. So if I just switch between, I can switch between, so I have a camera here that is covering me. I have this Lady Becca McGinnis is our caller. We have a guest potentially here, and then we have individual shots for the caller and the guest, and we even have a 3-box. And you can see as we moved through each of those, you actually got the right lower third. So if you had this set up some way, you'd always know you were covered with this. So how do we do that? There's a few things we did here. So why don't we dive into the VMix side first, and I'll go through exactly what we're doing here. So the first thing is, if you look at how we have this set up, we have all these individual inputs, and we built these multi-boxes just through layers and positioning. So very standard things that we did. We also have here at the bottom, we have all the different lower thirds. So this is sort of, as I switch through here, this is the lower third that we have for the full layout. This is the lower third we have for sort of a boxed single person. This is our 2-box lower third, and this is our 3-box lower third. So we have all of these laid out in basically the way we'd want to have them. But the trick to doing this is that, as opposed to having to figure out which one of these to put up as a lower third and make the switches, what we did here is we created a stacked input right here of all the lower thirds. So if you, let me go into the layers here. If you can see here, what we've done is we have all of our lower thirds set up here. And to activate a lower third as part of our sort of overlay, we always overlay this combined thing, but what we will do is, based on which guest we have, which layout we have, and which guest, we will select which layer we want to make visible. We do that through a small, simple script that will cover that. So that's basically the general model for what we're doing. The other thing is we are using data link. Well, basically we're just using the data source manager to pull in the data for these lower thirds. So this is just data that's coming from a CSV file. And to sort of go over this again for everybody, if you go down to this little hamburger menu on the bottom and go to Data Sources Manager, you can basically create a data source by clicking here, saying what type of file you have, and then you point to that file, and you can format the data. And so if I come here, what we have is we have this file, which is a CSV file that we pulled in, and we're just using this to pull all of the data out here. So very, very simple to do. So you can see here the data that we have from this file for the three callers, for myself, the host, the caller, and our guests coming in. So that's basically everything we have set up in our backend. So how do we trigger this? A couple of things, and trigger is really the key word. Anytime. So what you'll see here is if I, let me cut to something different. When I do the cut, so I'm not doing anything with like hotkeys or anything. If I just cut to any one of these sources, we'll go over here and we'll cut to the 2 box, you now see that everything is still going with it. And the way we're doing that is associated with each one of these inputs, we have a trigger. And this trigger, oh, let's go here. Okay, so this trigger does 2 things. So when we have, so sort of on transition in, so as we load that input into the program out, the first thing we do is we say, well, what type of layout does this program need? Does this input need when it's on program? And so in this case, it's a 3 box. So we're saying, let's run a script that will basically show the 3 box background. And if I do this here, so we'll sort of jump into the scripts in a second. But once we have that, then we say, okay, and who is this guest? So let's select the right title preset. And that's something that we're doing now. So we run a script and we select a title preset. So if you remember in VMix, if you go into any one of your inputs, you have what are down here basically title presets. So inside of VMix, we can go in, and when we take each one of these names and titles, in Data Sources Manager, we can go and say, what am I mapping to that? So in this case, I'm mapping the 3rd row, the 2nd row, the 1st row. So it's just very clearly, I'm taking the name and putting that in and picking the row that this guest is in. And so when we go in and select this input, no matter how it gets into program, that trigger happens, and you end up pulling up the right data and pulling up the right layout. And for the right layout, let me sort of jump over to scripting over here. For the right layout, we just have a set of boxes. So let's look at the 3 box one that we have. So it's very, very simple as a script here. All we're doing is we're saying, turn one of these layers on, basically the layer with the 3 box background where the 3 different semi-transparent segments, and turn off all the others. So that's all we're doing. So on each one of these that come in, we turn one segment off, and we turn one segment on and turn all the others off, and we should be good there. So that's basically everything that we have going here. So a simple script, and we go to the different data sources, and we pick which data source we want to map, and then we go and pick the presets that we have for each one of these. And that's basically it. That's all we've done to do this in VMix. And because of this, it's very simple now, no matter whether I'm touching a control surface, whether I'm using a Stream Deck, whether I'm just clicking on the UI, I will always have the right URL, the right overlay for the lower third available on screen. And then you can just toggle it on and off. So when I need it, I just bring it up and I know the right one is going to be there no matter what I do. All right, so this seems like a good time to jump in and talk about some of the comments that we have here. So thank you, everybody, for participating here. I really love this. So let's see. So we have Ryocaster. He's come up and said, let's see, This is the best notification for the day. Glad to know you're back. Well, it is good to be back, Ryo. Thank you very much for joining us here live. So we have Hakan Fors. He is joining us from Stockholm, Sweden. Thank you for the well wishes here. We're pretty excited about what we're going to be doing this season. So thanks for joining us. We now have Very Scott. Thank you. Yes, I have a bit of a woohoo here myself. I'm very, very happy to be back with all of this. So this is great. We have JP, JP.net. JP, thank you. Glad to see all of you again, albeit virtually, but this is a lot of fun for me. And then we have Philippe is commenting from Bogota. So Philippe, hello, thank you. Let's see. Oh, we also have JP just threw up another thing. Says, can you consider doing a tutorial on using XML feeds as data sources for titles for Column Manager? The challenge is using the XML tags. Actually, I can, and that's something that I probably will be doing pretty shortly, just because we've had a lot of people ask about using XML and live to air. So that's definitely something we can demonstrate. And it's really just a pretty straight walkthrough. So, yep. So with Column1, I mean, this is JP. I believe you're doing a trial on Column1. So yes, the XML works. I can show you exactly how to tie that in without any issue at all. So we will cover that shortly. Okay. So we got through the first piece with VMix pretty quickly, and in large part that's because we all have been talking about VMix for most of the past 2 seasons. So the next piece that I want to jump into is basically doing the exact same thing here, but this time doing it on a NewTek Tricaster. So sort of new in our studio for doing demos, we have a TC2 that we're going to be able to do all sorts of different Tricaster-based tutorials as well. So we figured a great way to start in on the Tricaster side is to mirror what we've done on the VMix side, so the parallels would become clearer between the 2 systems. So let's switch over to, actually there's one more comment here. Sorry if I jumped. Very Scott just asked, may I ask what the status of Column1 is? I'm very eager to try it out. So Scott, we are probably going to be putting it up live on our site within the next couple of weeks. So we're talking definitely in June for its go live date. So and of course, if you do want a free trial, that's available on the site. Just go over to neuralnet.com and you'll be able to sign up. So thanks for asking, Scott. Okay, so let's go over to the Tricaster now, and we'll take a look over here. So let me try to do something which is not just me sitting here. So let's see. We'll pull up somebody else here. There we go. Okay, so we have a multi-box with 2 people here now as our output. So if you look at the Tricaster UI, you'll see some things that are fairly different from the VMix UI approach. So the first thing, which is probably the most significant, is that inside the Tricaster, as opposed to just adding inputs, you basically have a fixed set of slots, and I can assign a different source to any one of those slots. So VMix is sort of very open-ended. The Tricaster has more structure to it. And that, I think, is something that's pretty important for different purposes. So in the Tricaster universe, if I am working with different types of crews and I need to have people that could sit down and just work with a Tricaster, it is far more intuitive than VMix because it works very much the way a broadcast solution works. Though if you want to do some insanely crazy things, VMix gives you a lot of flexibility to go off and to do some incredibly complex and convoluted looping of video and overlays. So basically two different approaches targeting two different audiences. So let me talk a little bit now in detail about how this UI works. Down here in this bottom segment, I don't know if you can see the mouse or not, but you can see things flashing over here. So what you have are our basic program and preview buses. And on this bus, I can turn around and say, which source do I want coming out? So I can have any one of the sources that we have coming in. We have a bunch of blank ones that are sitting here that we're not using. You also have video players. So again, with VMix, you can just load a video into an input and just use it. You have 4 video players here on the TC2, and you can put whatever video you want in there, but it has more complex lists and other things you can do with that. And then the last thing you have is you have 8 MEs, and an ME is basically a mix effects input. This is very much like the layers inside of VMix. So you have 8 of these, and the way these mix effects work is that you can place things into, you can have up to 4 rows in the mix effect, and then you can have 4 downstream keys dedicated to that mix effect. So sort of a different layout. So that, just trying to give everybody a general overview. The way that you do lower thirds and other graphics on the Tricaster is something called buffers. And so a buffer is basically a lightweight input that you can load graphics into. So if let's call up one of these buffers here, see if I can show this here. Let's see, we'll call up buffer, what do I want? Okay, we'll call it buffer 7 here, because that's, there we go. So now you can see, it's a little hard to see here, but you have just a name and a title in here on the bottom, because this is just very similar to the graphics we had over in VMix. So when you load this, one of the things you get inside of this is the ability, like you can put in different data presets inside of VMix, you have basically the same thing here on the Tricaster. I can go in and I can say, this is the graphic that I have as a layout. I can have different presets that are set up. And if you'll notice, the way it works in Tricaster land, as opposed to going to something like Data Source Manager, where you actually do the mapping, what the Tricaster has is something called Data Link. And Data Link will look at a single folder and will take any one of the files that are in that folder and try to decompose it into name, value, pair data elements. So it sort of handles that on the back end and lets you effectively pull any data you want from any file that's in that folder. And the way you handle that, if I sort of click on this here, as opposed to saying John Mahoney here, what it actually says is percent hostname percent. So what this is, we said it's name, value, pairs. So this is the name that has a value associated with it, that pairing. And so all that the Tricaster does in this case is it uses Data Link, its data management framework, to go in, gives it a name, and says, give me the value associated with this name. And so all we've done in these data presets is I've actually set this up with different data link values. So the first says, take whatever the host name is. If I go to preset 2 over here, now you can see, as opposed to saying host name, now it says caller name. And so that's the name. So when you set up these data presets, you could just type in hard data. So say you wanted certain things like messages that you use all the time, you could put those in. But you can also put in variables. And so when you switch between your different data presets, you now can switch between a mapped value through data link or a fixed value that you typed in. So that's part of the mechanism that we're going to leverage here. So how do we actually handle this inside of the Tricaster? So for the Tricaster, we're using what Tricaster has called a macro system. Very similar to sort of a hybrid between VMix shortcuts and VMix scripting. So if I go up here and look at the macros, go to configure macros here, We just set up a set of macros very similar to the macros that we set up inside of VMix. And so we have them for the different one box if it's the caller, the guest, the host, the two box for host caller, host guest, and then we have the three box with everybody. And then essentially, this gives us now the ability to pick whichever ones of these we want through scripting. And I'll just give you a sense of what's inside of here. So let's look at the two box host plus caller. I'm just going to edit this on here. So I know we're digging a few layers down. But so what this is basically doing, so this is a little more cryptic than some of the things that we dealt with on the VMix side. So I'm basically turning around and saying, which layout do I want to use? And we'll come to that in a moment. And then which downstream key do I need to correspond to that layout? So what overlay? Is it a 2-box? Is it a 3-box? Whatever I need. And which data preset for that is going to be associated with it. And then I just turn around and put it up on the main row. So let me explain, because this is not as clear as we probably like to see normally. So inside of VMix, I take one of these MEs, and this is part of the power that's inside the ME structure inside of VMix. So we're using, you know, in the Tricaster here. So we have ME1, so that's our mix effect that we have all of these layouts in. So one of the things that's in the mix effect is something called compositions or comps. And what a composition is it's basically, it lets you take and describe the layout of all of the inputs you have and all of the overlays. And you can resize them, reposition them, put them any way you want. And then you can dynamically switch between them. So if we can jump to the output here with the, so if you see, if I move between these, we have, this is very similar to what you've seen with the VMix merge, where you have all of these different layouts in here. And so what we wanted was, no matter which composition that we had, we'd wanted to be able to make sure that we had the right lower third available for it. And that's how we work with this. So we are using these as compositions and switching between the compositions. And when we do that, we make sure we have all the right elements for the lower third. So if you look at when I set up these macros, what the macros are basically doing is it's taking and, so we'll just edit this one, which is simple. It's basically saying, which composition do I want? So in this case, I said, I want composition number 5. And then it's putting the right buffers and the right presets and all that for this, because this is for the caller. So that's basically all it's doing. It's picking which one of those layouts that I want, saying which buffer has the right lower third layouts to correspond to that, and for the content of this, which preset am I using? So it lets me make sure that I'm covering exactly what I want to do with the data. So the layout and the data both change, and then it just puts that live. So if you look at this, you know, when I sit here in action, if I turn and toggle on the lower third here, now when I'm going between all of these comps, you'll now see that these are all just switching with the correct lower thirds in place. The other thing that I can do, though, and if you'll notice, if I go to any one of these basic inputs, I can just click and send one of them to the program, and it actually is also doing that. So this is not using comps, it's not using macros, I'm just switching. This is, again, something, if you want to trace it equivalent, it's very similar to triggers inside of VMix. So this is called automation. So if I go to any one of these inputs, so let's go to this input up here, and we can see when I click on this little gear for what I can do with it, we have something called automation. And what this says is, anytime this condition is met, anytime for this input, this condition is met, it's on the program row, it's in the preview, it's in one of the ME rows, so you can set up as an ME row A, or it's in a downstream key, I can trigger a macro that will very specifically say, what do I want? So in this case, when this goes into the program row, what I do is say, when it goes into the program row, I want you to put this lower third full preset macro. And that's basically saying preset 2 is for the caller. So we have, like if you look at the inputs over here, 1, 2, 3. That's basically it. So preset 2 is for the caller. So I'm saying when it goes in, set up the lower third for the caller here. You could also do things to say, I want to do something different when it leaves. And so that's, a fairly nice feature, but you have that for all of these different triggers. So basically the same way when you do the drop down, when you have a trigger for an input, you want to do it on completion, you want to do it on transition in, on transition out. This gives you sort of a rough equivalent in the Tricaster world for how to do all of this stuff. So that is effectively how we've done the same thing. We've put the lower thirds and buffers, created macros to trigger all the different comps and make sure they have the right lower third buffer associated. And we did this all, in this case, by just using here our main downstream key on our entire output. So if you notice, as I sort of keep the mouse over here, if I go and I change what I have moving through here, you can see that this downstream key is changing. And that's how we're doing this. When we go and say, what buffer am I assigning to downstream key 1? And that's part of what that macro script is doing. It's basically changing that buffer there and then picking the right data preset. So this was not a very long show. It has definitely taken us a while to get back. But I wanted to do something that started to draw some equivalences between how you do things on a VMix system and how you do them on a Tricaster. We have been using Tricaster internally forever. So we love VMix, and it does a lot of things for us as a tool in our sort of production toolkit. But our main production here is switched on Tricaster, and so we really wanted to start demonstrating more of those capabilities as we go through this season. And hopefully you found this one useful as well. So before I wrap up, let me just see, we have a few more comments, I think. So let's see, Ryocaster said, more on Data Manager. He says, the Format tab there is bracket 0. I figured out that we can add info before and after the 0, and it'll change the output info. Is there anything else you can share about that? So let me see. If we're talking, I'm trying to see which data input I had the 0 on. So go to Data Manager here. Sorry. So in Data Sources Manager, is this what you were talking about? I just want to be sure I'm in the right spot. So we're not using. Oh, I understand now. Sorry, now I know what you're talking about. You're talking about if I were to come into here and go into the title editor. Okay, so yes, inside of all of these, you can do different types of formatting. So especially if this is something like a numbered source, this would be something that you could definitely change the formatting on. Let me see if I have something here that I could do a demonstration of this on. So yeah, let's see. I'll just put. So I'll screw this up. Let's just take this, and what I'll turn around and say, I want to do this as a clock. So what this will now do is you have formatting here that you can use to change how you want this layout to work. So in this case, if you sit here and say, I want to do hours, minutes, and seconds, what the small h's are saying is, I want to do this as 12-hour time, so AM and PM. You can also, if you do, so let's sort of go back to the clock, I can do 24-hour time, and you notice what it did to change formatting is it put capital H's here, and that says use 24-hour versus 12-hour. So some subtle little things there. The other thing, though, that you have is you have things like countdowns. So doing the formatting here, what this is saying is, okay, we can do a countdown to 3 p.m., and we want to show that in 24-hour time with hours, minutes, and seconds. So if you wanted something that would happen there. So this is really just a way to take typically date information. I believe it may work for other types of information, but time and date is typically what this is used for, and make formatting changes for how you want that. So if I didn't want to see the hours at all, I could turn around and say, okay, let's just take the hours out of here. And we'll, to make this work, let me see if I can sort of call this title up. Is that, trying to remember which one it was, probably this one. So if I put this up, yes, so now you can see that it's doing a countdown here with 28 minutes and 31 seconds till 3 p.m. So this is giving us sort of an easy way to change the formatting. But if I went in here and I wanted this to be with, with hours or other things, you'd have all of that there as well. So that's just a quick overview of that. There is a link, I can try to post it in comments after, which describes all the different layouts. This is something that's sort of a Microsoft published standard for how to do some of this formatting. So that's really where they took that from. So let's see. Hopefully, and so if I didn't cover everything, we can jump in again in the post show. So Raul, if you want to dig deeper, happy to do that. So let's see. We have Spatial Optic. Say yes, another woohoo. I have a lot of woohoos. I am very, very happy to have the show back on. So thank you everyone for the well wishes with coming back. So we have Deadline AV saying good topic. Thanks. So we're always looking for different types of topics. I mean, we've covered a lot of things in the past, and so some of the things that we're going to introduce with the Tricaster will give us some latitude for covering ground that we've covered before, but for VMix and sort of thinking of it differently and potentially updating some of the approaches. But glad you enjoyed this one. And Very Scott said it was a great first show back. He'll definitely be subscribing to Call-in-One once it's released. So that's excellent. So yeah, so the price point will be consistent. The way we're pricing Call-in-One is that it's $99 a year, or you get it free when you purchase live to air. So any version, the 6-channel or the 12-channel. So it's just really an easy way, low risk way to get in and start to work with the live to air ecosystem. But then if you want to jump in, we can take that money off if you have part of the year or whatever, and we'll get you onto live to air. So good. So why don't we call this a wrap for today? We'll just head over to our post show and we can talk more casually about what I've been doing for the last 6 months. Any other topics you have that you'd like us to cover on the show, or anything we've covered that you want to have a little more detail on. So I'll see you in a few. All right, we are back in the post show. I just want to say one thing. We're not getting any of the comments coming in through Facebook, so my apologies. But I was told that Richard over on Facebook said hi. We can't post it here, but Richard, we appreciate you watching over on Facebook, and thank you very much for joining us live. It was great having you come on today. Join us today for the show. So A little background now. We took a lot longer to get back online than we thought. We were just overloaded with things that we needed to get done on the business side. So definitely appreciate the patience there. We also have been doing a lot of work in the studio. So we have sort of totally new sessions for everything we're doing with the show, all the new elements we put in, different layouts in the studio. So all of these things just took a lot longer than we thought. So thank you all for being so patient with everything. And, hopefully now we will be able to get back on our regular Fridays at 2 p.m. schedule. So what else is there that I wanted to share? I think a big piece of what motivated this was I know that we've touched on things in the TriCaster world before, but we never really have done that deep a dive into the TriCaster framework and how all the different components of TriCaster interact. And because a lot of folks that watch the show are coming from the VMix side, I felt it was good to do something that created this sort of parallel between everybody here. We have basically this type of show allowed us to touch on most of the key elements inside of the TriCaster. So macros, automation, and sort of triggering on inputs. It talked about buffers. It talked about lower thirds and data presets. It talked about MEs and sort of the general things we do with MEs. And we do have a lot more we're going to do and sort of show off different ways that you can leverage these capabilities to do things that all of us are working on sort of with, traditional productions as well as some of the hybrid productions. So Barry Scott saying, nothing ever goes as planned. Don't sweat it. Yeah, I can tell you, Barry Scott, that there was some real sweating going on for some of this stuff. It was just, we've been doing some. I'm happy to share. This is sort of our community here. So we were doing a lot of back end work on our live to air system. So there was basically a major rewrite of all of our back end. To scale up better because we're really sort of positioning ourselves for the next push forward. So that's something that we're going to be rolling out later this year, but we needed to get all those elements in place. And we've just had a lot of, sort of smaller updates, but very important updates, both in terms of features as well as terms of performance. So a lot of things that went into that and, the testing that goes around all of that. So that was really, a big piece of that. And then we wanted, in starting this next season, to have, enough new things baked in so people, feel that, we're continuing to invest and evolve the show. So that was all part of what we were working on. So yeah, some of the stuff was, you get and say, oh, this time schedule was a little bit of aggressive or optimistic on certain things. But I mean, the good news is we really are in a good position with everything we had. The call-in-one, like I said, should be out really shortly. And that's again stuff that nothing just rolls out in a business on its own. So we're going to have the collateral that goes with that, the ability to get that as part of the trials and do all that. So all of these things are all pieced together as part of the workflow we have on the business end. So and it's really funny when you think about any operation, any technical operation, there are basically complex workflows. So we talk about it a lot here for the things that we do in the production space, but it's true really in any technology-based infrastructure that you're counting on and managing. They all have workflows, and those workflows always need to be debugged. But so this was this seemed like a good show to start with, though. Coming back to the intention behind this, and hopefully you saw it as something that was useful as well. we have things that we're looking to do on a few fronts this season. So I mentioned stuff where we want to look at some of the things with AI. So if you we're watching some of the video that we put together for our lead-in, for our pre-show, and for the between the show and the post-show. Those are videos that we put together using DaVinci Resolve. So one of the other things that I want to dive into this season as well is a bit of DaVinci Resolve and a lot of the AI tools that are in there, because I think we've really talked a lot about the streaming aspect and sort of the live production piece. But we haven't really talked a lot about the pre-production and some of the post-production, like creating shorts that you may want to put up and share, which just have clips, and how can you do that and sort of process and edit that. So we are very, very impressed with Resolve. We've been using it now about 3 years. And where it has gone in these last 3 years is pretty incredible. And as a part of that, there's a lot of AI that is being built into Resolve. Some really incredibly impressive things that it can now do. So we want to share a lot of that. And I'm actually thinking of doing that for a show, just sort of some of the sort of a basic intro to something in Resolve to get that kicked off. So we'll touch on each of the key points we want for this season. But that's something else that we're going to be doing, and we're really looking forward to that. So if you have specific things that you would like us to cover, VMix, Tricaster, pre-post, anything, we're happy to sort of fit that into our calendar and try to build shows around that. So please feel free. You can just send that to John at neural.com or John at streamingalchemy.tv. Both of those will get to me, and we can sort of take it from there. Let's see. So Very Scott just saying, were you always using Tricaster for your shows, or was it VMix in the past? No, we were always using Tricaster. So when we launched the show, we launched it on Tricaster. We actually had we go way back in the Tricaster universe. So we started out with the toaster on the Commodore Amiga, then the Toaster Flyer, which recorded, then the NewTek video toaster, and then we got into the Tricaster line. And we started with the TC850 and have moved along from there. So now we use several Tricasters here, but it's always been sort of the heart of what we do, from a production side for the show. So, but thanks for asking. And this is something where I can sort of spend some time deconstructing how we assembled our whole show and some of the things there, because that may be interesting to folks as well, to see how are we pulling together everything that's going on in our back end. And I did promise a studio tour, so that is something else we will have this season as well. So let's see. JP has another suggestion. It's a tutorial on using the audio buses in VMix with call-in-one. So show audio goes to guest minus their voice. Yeah, so that's probably, I think, JP, since you're talking about this, it probably makes sense to do a sort of call-in-one with VMix. And we can certainly, sort of do something similar to what we've done today, where we can do it with VMix and we can do it with the Tricaster. And I think that will create a sort of a broad enough set of content to make a show out of that. So let me just add that in, and we'll get that on. We'll get that on our list. So JP, thank you. So let's see. So we have. So yeah. So Barry Scott is saying, "Whoa, that's way back." Yes, that is way back. I think we're probably talking well over 30 years with the original Amiga. So I mean, so this is funny, because I thought the big upgrade is you went from the Amiga to, I think it was the Amiga 2000, or maybe even 3,000. I forget. That was like the big uptick in processing power. But yes, so that does go quite a way back. So we have Samuel Nordvik. Hello from Norway. Samuel, thank you for joining us live. And again, I'm impressed when people take time out of their Friday nights as they wrap up their week to join us live. So thank you for doing that. Definitely appreciate it, Samuel. So, all right. So I think this was a shorter show, but hopefully everybody found it interesting. So we'll probably give this a wrap. If you have any last questions or comments, just get them in now. So what I think is we'll do a show next week on DaVinci Resolve. I have a couple of target topics for some things that might work with that could be good for doing some of the pre and post work that you have to do for your productions. And then I'll definitely look into scheduling something with Call-in-One. So, all right, everyone. Thank you very much. It is fantastic to be back with all of you. I am really blessed to be a part of this community and have all of you join me on Fridays, and for the number of people that came back. This is really impressive. So thank you all. So until next week, be safe, be well. See you then.